Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're tackling a huge topic that has been making headlines and whispering in the ears of economists worldwide: global debt. You've probably seen the numbers, and they are staggering. We're talking about trillions upon trillions of dollars. The big question is, are we sitting on a ticking time bomb? Is this mountain of debt setting the stage for the next major economic crisis? Let's break it down. First, let's get a handle on the sheer scale of this. As of late 2023, global debt, that's everything owed by governments, corporations, and households combined, surpassed $313 trillion. To put that in perspective, that's more than 3 times the entire world's economic output, or GDP. The debt to GDP ratio is a key metric here, and it's at an all-time high. It's like a person earning $50,000 a year having over $150,000 in loans. It makes you a little nervous, right? So, how did we get here? Well, it's been a long journey. A major catalyst was the 2008 financial crisis. To prevent a total collapse, central banks around the world, like the US Federal Reserve, slashed interest rates to near zero. This made borrowing incredibly cheap. Governments borrowed to fund stimulus packages and bailouts. Corporations borrowed to expand, buy back their own stock, and invest. Households borrowed for mortgages and consumer goods. For over a decade, cheap money was the name of the game. Then the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Governments unleashed unprecedented levels of spending to support economies, businesses, and individuals through lockdowns. This was a necessary lifeline, but it added another massive layer to the global debt pile. Public debt, the money governments owe, skyrocketed everywhere. Now you might be thinking, okay, the number is big, but so what? As long as we can pay it back, it's fine, right? And that's the crucial point. The problem isn't just the amount of debt, it's the cost of servicing that debt. For years, with interest rates at rock bottom, managing these huge debts was relatively easy. But that era is over. To combat the high inflation that followed the pandemic and supply chain disruptions, central banks have aggressively raised interest rates. Suddenly, that cheap debt isn't so cheap anymore. Imagine your adjustable rate mortgage payment suddenly doubling or tripling. That's essentially what's happening on a global scale. Let's look at the different players. First, governments. For advanced economies like the US, Japan, and many European nations, they have higher debt levels, but are generally seen as safer bets. They can usually roll over their debt, meaning they issue new bonds to pay off old ones. But even for them, the strain is showing. Higher interest payments mean less money for public services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. It becomes a political tightrope walk. Do you raise taxes, cut spending, or just keep borrowing and hope for the best? The situation is far more precarious for developing and emerging market countries. Many of these nations borrowed heavily in US dollars. Now, with the dollar being strong and their own currencies weakening, their debt burden has effectively increased without them borrowing a single extra cent. They have to pay back their loans in a currency that is now more expensive for them to acquire. This has already pushed several countries like Sri Lanka, Ghana, and Zambia into default. This isn't just an economic issue. It creates real human suffering, leading to shortages of food, medicine, and fuel. It's a sovereign debt crisis in the making, and it could have a domino effect. Next up, we have corporate debt. For a decade, companies loaded up on cheap loans. This fueled growth, but it also created a lot of zombie companies, firms that are only earning enough to pay the interest on their debts, but not the principal. They're technically alive, but not really productive. As interest rates rise, these zombies are the first to fall. A wave of corporate bankruptcies could lead to mass layoffs, which would then hit consumer spending and drag down the entire economy. We're already seeing cracks appear in sectors that are highly sensitive to interest rates, like commercial real estate. Empty office buildings and struggling retail spaces are a clear sign of distress. Finally, there's household debt. This is your mortgages, car loans, credit card balances, and student loans. In many countries, household debt is at a record high. As interest rates climb, people have less disposable income. They cut back on spending, which is bad news for businesses. If enough people can't make their loan payments, especially mortgages, it could trigger a housing market downturn. We all remember what happened in 2008 when a housing crisis spiraled into a global financial meltdown. While lending standards are generally better today, the sheer volume of debt means the risk is still very real. So are we headed for a crash? The answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's more complex. On one hand, the ingredients for a crisis are all there. Massive debt levels, rapidly rising interest rates, slowing economic growth, and geopolitical instability. A shock in one part of the system, say a major bank failure or a default by a large country, could quickly spread through our deeply interconnected global financial system. This is what economists call systemic risk. However, there are also reasons to be cautiously optimistic. Central banks and governments have more tools and experience now than they did in 2008. They are more aware of the risks and can act more quickly to provide liquidity and prevent a total meltdown. Banks are better capitalized, meaning they have a bigger cushion to absorb losses. The most likely scenario isn't necessarily a single dramatic crash like 2008. Instead, we might be heading into a prolonged period of what some call a rolling crisis or a slow-motion deleveraging. This would mean different sectors and different countries experience crises at different times. We might see a wave of corporate defaults in one region, a sovereign debt crisis in another, and a housing correction somewhere else. The global economy would face years of sluggish growth, high financial instability, and difficult policy choices. It would be less of a sudden heart attack and more of a chronic illness. What can be done? There are no easy answers. Governments need to find a path toward fiscal consolidation, that is, getting their budgets under control, but without strangling economic growth. This is an incredibly difficult balance. For developing countries, debt restructuring and relief are essential. Corporations need to focus on strengthening their balance sheets rather than chasing risky growth. And for individuals, this is a time for financial prudence. Building up savings, paying down high-interest debt, and avoiding over-leveraging are more important than ever. The global debt situation is one of the most significant challenges of our time. It will shape the economic landscape for years to come. It's not about predicting a doomsday scenario, but about understanding the very real risks and vulnerabilities in our global financial system. By being aware, we can better prepare for the turbulence that may lie ahead. What do you think? Are you worried about the level of global debt, or do you think the system can handle it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and if you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. See you in the next one.